Hi everybody, welcome to Sprague Woodturning. My name is Jim. If you haven't been here before, this is Proudly Turning channel where each and every week I show people how to make things on the lathe. Now, this is the first ever question and answer video that I've done. So I've got a bunch of questions from a bunch of folks and I'm going to do my best to answer them best that I can. So without further ado, this is the question and answer video. All right, I got my old man glasses on so I can read here. First question is from Michael. Can you explain the vacuum setup? And this is a question that I get all the time. So I'm glad that I'm doing this video so that I can reference this video in the future. But yeah, I'll show you basically the parts to the vacuum system and how they work. It's actually a pretty simple setup when you think about it. All right, so the first thing that I'll talk about are the vacuum chucks themselves. These three come from One Way, and of course, this is a homemade one, and I'll cover that here after I've talked about these. So we have the 8-inch, the 5-inch, and the 3-inch. These are made from aluminum and are very thick. I'm going to say they're probably about a 1/2 inch in thickness. So there's no way that you're going to be able to collapse these. And when you buy these from One Way, they come with a seal former. So you put your seal on when this is on the lathe. You put your vacuum on, and then this seal former pushes in on the seal and then makes sure that it's got really good contact with the drum itself. The most common one that I use is the 5-inch, but the 8-inch is has a lot more holding power than the 5-inch, and the 5-inch has a lot more holding power than the 3-inch, and that's just basically because of the volume that's involved with them. One thing that you really have to be careful with when using a vacuum system like this is that you can collapse the bottom of the bowl. There's so much vacuum there that you can actually collapse the bottom of your bowl. So the larger the chuck that you're using, the more likelihood that's going to happen, or it will deform the bottom of the bowl. So you'll have it on the lathe and you'll be turning along and everything looks great. And then when you release the vacuum, the bottom will bump out. so then you're like, oh, now we're in trouble. So this is one consideration you can, and I'll show you here on the vacuum pump itself, how to bleed that air away so that it doesn't have so much vacuum. But yeah, I mean, I showed this last week. This is a homemade chuck, and basically what it is, so this is 4-inch PVC, and what I did was I put a joint together. So there's two pieces. There's a smaller piece on the inside of this. So you got a male and female fitting, and I put a whole bunch of polyurethane glue around this. I taped all of the joints down inside of here. I also used, I can't remember if I used polyurethane. I think I did, down inside of here. And this is two pieces of 3/4 inch MDF that are glued together. And then just the face plate for the bottom, for my lathe. And well, you can see the polyurethane glue there. So I glued that in place. You need to make sure that there's no vacuum loss between all of these surfaces. And then anyway, once I got the chuck on there, or the conduit, I kind of formed it over, made a rounded edge on it, and then put the seal on it. So this is a double seal. Yeah, it's a double seal, and it works good. And of course you have to drill a hole through it, or else you're not going to be able to have any vacuum. I do treat this one a little more gingerly than than these ones. These ones again are made from really heavy aluminum, and it's, you're just not going to collapse these, and you're not going to get any air leakage other than the adapter that goes in the bottom of these. And for those of you who are not aware, like, I think that pretty much all companies do this with their chucks. You can get different adapters to fit your lathe. It's not just one size. So there's all kinds of different adapters, so you have to screw them on. So you can get air leakage around here, but for the most part, I haven't really noticed that. But as long as it's seated properly, it shouldn't be an issue. So those are the vacuum chucks. Now I only have this set up for the outboard end of my lathe. The outboard and inboard threads on my spindles are different. So I can't use this on the inboard side. I know there's been some questions like how come I don't do this on the inboard side of my lathe, and that's why, because I'd have to take this adapter out and put another adapter in for it to fit on the inboard side of my lathe. And again, I'm left-handed, so I prefer to work on the outboard end of my lathe if at all possible. All right, so let's look at the pump itself and the parts that attach to the lathe. All right, so I'm going to use the GoPro here because it's going to be the easiest way to do this. That is that's a gassed vacuum pump, oilless. Oilless pumps are the best to have. And this is the adapter that goes on to the lathe, and I'll show you that here in a second. And of course, you've got a valve assembly. So when it's in this position here, that means the air is being pulled from here and not down the hose. Once you put it in this orientation, it's now going to draw vacuum in through here and then into the vacuum pump. So that's the whole idea of this setup here. So this has a bearing inside of it. Hopefully you're going to be able to see that. And that allows this to free spool on the when it's mounted on the lathe. And I'll show you that here right now. All right, so here's our adapter, and of course this is the complete one-way system. I should have mentioned that by now, but this is the complete vacuum chucking system from One Way. And of course these adapters, you can get them in different sizes from One Way, just depends on what your lathe is. It gets screwed on to the arbor. And again, you know, I don't know if this is necessary or not, but I've taped up all of these joints. So when the lathe is running, then of course, with that bearing in there, it allows it to free spool, but you can still draw a vacuum. All right, so on this lathe, you can open up the top, and you can see we've got the vacuum adapter on the inboard side. This is the vacuum chuck that I've put on the outboard side. So when you close that valve that's down below, that will pull vacuum through here, through the adapter, and then down into the vacuum pump. The only thing that you really have to have in order for a vacuum system like this is you have to have a hollow arbor, or a hole through your arbor, so that of course the vacuum pump can draw. If you don't have a hollow arbor, there was a vacuum chuck setup that was on the market. I don't know if it's still a thing or not. I haven't seen it in a long time. Maybe anybody watching this might be able to do that. But essentially it was on the outside here, and you could only use it on the inboard. I suppose you could probably use it on outboard too if you had the right adapter. So I don't know if that is still available or not for people that have solid metal arbors. One of the things that I really wanted was a separate vacuum pump for my pressure pot, or sorry, my vacuum chamber. So what I have to do is unscrew this from here. It's not really that big of a deal. I unscrew this from here, and then I just put that into the hose and put a hose clamp on it, and that's it. And it works perfectly fine that way. But I would like to just leave this all together and then have a separate pump, especially when I go over to the new workshop. So it's going to be a little trial and error and set up and see exactly what we're going to do. But I definitely would like to get another vacuum pump that is oilless and gassed. Is one of the best, if not the best, in vacuum pumps. Hopefully that answers that question. I don't know if there's anything more to it than that. It will depend on where you live in the world and what altitude you're at as far as how much vacuum you can draw. It's got something to do with sea level. But like I said, here it's about 26, I would say it's probably 26 to 28 inches of vacuum. It just depends on how many leaks you have. And when I say leaks, I mean these are very, very small leaks, right? The other thing to keep in mind is woods that are really porous will pull right through that wood. So if you're, for instance, using red oak, that's what comes to mind right now. Red oak is very porous, and it will allow a lot of air to be pulled through the piece that you're working on. So sometimes you won't be able to even achieve those types of vacuums just based on the type of wood that you're working with. Right, well, hopefully that answers that question in regards to vacuum. I know that sometimes it can be a little confusing. People don't really understand exactly how that's being held. The other big one is, let me get a vacuum chuck and I'll show you. Now, I know that I've covered this in the past, but I'll do it again. If you've got a piece on this vacuum chuck that just barely fits on the outside or the inside of this, what can happen is while you're turning, so you know you're creating vibrations when you're turning, and the piece can actually move on the chuck, and it's not real noticeable. It's really, really slow. And then when you get done, you can tell that, you know, kind of the base is offset, or, you know, it's just something's off, and that's what can happen. So it's important that whatever you put on these, if at all possible, that it drapes down over the edge of it, and that way it can't move back and forth while it's under vacuum, because it definitely is a thing. It's happened to me, I'm gonna say 2 or 3 times here on the channel while shooting videos. So anyway, watch out for that. All right, so the next question is from Lance. How long do you spend sanding most pieces? And that's a good question and a difficult question to answer, because different woods will sand at different rates. If you're looking at, say, butternut, birch, poplar, you can throw that in there. The softer hardwoods, they're a lot easier to sand than, say, hard maple, sugar maple, walnut. Cherry's not too bad. It's kind of in the middle, I find. But maple burl. So you know, you really want your tool work to be good when you're working with harder woods, because it's going to cost you a lot more money in sandpaper. But I also look at sandpaper as a tool. So, you know, back in my production days, as long as there was no tear out, yeah, you could feel maybe some lumps and undulations within the wood, you know, just seconds with the 60 grit, and that's all gone. So that's kind of how this progressed for me. So typically I take 3 passes with each grit on, you know, as we go. So first one will be lathe running forward, drill in reverse. 6 passes, I'll have a look at it. A lot of times if it's 60 grit, that's really all I need. And then same thing with the next grit. I'll throw 80 grit on, lathe will be in reverse, drill will be forward, and I'll just alternate through the grain. So, you know, 60, 80, 120, 220, 220 or 240. 320 is typically all I would do on hardwoods without any epoxy. And of course, if we're working with epoxy, I'll sand all the way to 800. So, you know, I'll go from 320 to 400, 500, 600, and so 400, 600, and 800. That's the last grit. And then of course I'll buff after that. And the buffing should give me a finish that's around 1,000 to 1,200. That's kind of what I'm shooting for when I'm working with epoxy. But that's just not required when it comes to sanding wood. You'll never see, well, I shouldn't say you won't see the difference in its surface, but, you know, in order to get things done and done in a reasonable amount of time, I think that going to 320 is more than anything above 320. You're really polishing the wood. You might even say above 220, you're kind of starting to polish the wood. So, you know, in most cases, I don't think that it's really necessary. And it's also going to depend on the size of the piece you're working on, how long it's going to take to sand as well. So, you know, the size of the wood, the type of the wood is going to determine how long it takes. But, you know, most of, say, the epoxy pieces that you see here on the channel, I can sand those from start to finish in under 20 minutes, somewhere around there. But like I said, 3 passes on each grit and then have a look at it. The other thing that I like to do as well, I like to blow out the grain. Some people would say you should vacuum out the grain before you go to the next grit, because those little grits are going to be left in the wood. So, you know, if you've started at 60 and then you move up another grit, well, there may be some of that 60 grit still in the piece you're working on. So it's good to get rid of that before you go to the next grit. So, you know, hopefully that answers that question. Again, it's kind of hard to really put your finger on it, because I've sanded pieces really quickly, and then I've sanded pieces that, you know, it just seemed to take forever. But those are typically in harder woods, and that's why when you're working with harder woods, it's really important that your tool work is good before moving on to sanding. All right, so the next question is going to be from Joe. How do you like the aftermarket attachment cutters from Hunter Tools? Well, this is another thing that when I first started, I didn't see the value in carbide tools. I didn't. and then I started doing epoxy. And then after sharpening all the time, and if you look back on my channel, I also was using a different manufacturer for these tools. But to be honest with you, I was kind of really struggling with those tools. So someone suggested Hunter Tools, especially the Core Pro cutter. And that's where my relationship started with Mike Hunter. You know, I after getting that and seeing how great the Core Pro cutter was working over the original one from One Way, I said, okay, this is neat. What else do you have? And then, you know, this is where it went. So, you know, I was sick and tired. I was sick and tired of sharpening all the time with a gouge. I'm a gouge guy. This is the 5/8 bowl gouge from David Ellsworth. That was my go-to tool. That, you know, I used that in a parting tool for 20 years. I didn't really see the need for anything else. And then when I got into epoxy, I seen the need for carbide tools. So the fact that you can use the Hercules the same way that you can use a gouge, that was a big one for me. So you don't have to basically relearn your turning. This is one thing when in regards to the Hercules, the number 3 anyway, in relationship to the 5/8 bowl gouge from David Ellsworth. But you know, the less sharpening. That for me is, you know, you look at all the time you're at the grinder and how much wear and tear it's putting on your tools, because I like to work with sharp tools, then, you know, it's a no-brainer to kind of switch to carbide. Yeah, you have to pay for the cutters, but it's really going to depend on what you're again, it depends on the wood you're working with and what you're doing with those cutters, how long they're going to last. So, you know, it's just treat it as a business expense, because that's what it is. But by using the carbide tools from Hunter Tools, I'm able to do my projects faster on the lathe and less time at the grinder. But you know, having Hunter Tools as a sponsor is absolutely awesome, and I'm really glad that Mike has decided to sponsor my channel. I've got a bunch of his tools now, and you see them. I use them every week, and trust me, if I don't like that tool, and I tell all my sponsors, look, if you give me something and I don't like it, you're going to hear about it, and you're going to hear about it right here. So, you know, the fact that he's able to give me these tools and basically put his reputation on the line speaks a lot for, you know, who he is and as a tool manufacturer. Same thing with Designer Epoxy, same thing with sandpaper.ca and Starbond. You know, they're all great sponsors. And so anyway, as far as the carbide tools are concerned, I really like the carbide tools from Hunter Tools. And if you remember my earlier videos, I was using another tool manufacturer that uses carbide tools, and I was struggling with them. I would get a lot of really devastating catches and a lot of chip out and tear out, and I was a bit frustrated with them. And that's where the suggestion came to try Hunter Tools, and I'm glad I did. So hopefully that answered that question. Great question. What's next? This one's from Peter. When will t-shirts or merch be available? Yeah, like I should have had my merch line up and running a long time ago. I thought I had somebody lined up and that fell through. Right now I've just got so much on my plate here that it's I'm kind of maxed out, and I'll kind of get into that a little later on here. But yes, I'm hoping that this year merch will be available. I know that I'm probably missing out on some revenue there, but anyway, it's just it's on my very long list of things to do. And now with the workshop being done or under construction, then you know, this is starting to get a little it's starting to get a little bit overwhelming, shooting video over there, here, dealing with all the business side of YouTube as well, but I'll get into that a little later on. But yes, hopefully merch will be available this year. Okay, this one's from Lisa. Why did you, for the most part, switch to epoxy? And that is, again, a very great question. I was bored. I'm just gonna tell you, I was bored. When I came to YouTube, I came here with the inlays, and that's kind of what made me unique here on YouTube, and that's kind of what initially grew my channel, you know, kind of to where we are today. But, you know, I'm out of inlay ideas. People say that they want to see more inlays, but you know, the thing is, I could bring the same inlay once a month, but I mean, that's not really, I don't know, maybe that is fine. Tell me what you think. But I do find that I was getting bored. I was getting bored with what I had done, because keep in mind that from 2012, when I retired from the Canadian Armed Forces, I was a full-time turner right up until the world event happened. And that's kind of how I switched here to YouTube. So, you know, but before that, I mean, I've got to have close to 25 years under my belt turning. And while I certainly appreciate all wood pieces, beautiful wood pieces, I was looking for a pop of color. I was looking to rejuvenate myself when it came to working on the lathe. And I started watching Turner channels like Doug from Pole Barn. He was one of the ones that I first started watching years ago. And I was like, yeah, you know, this is really cool. I like the fact that you can just take junk wood, throw some epoxy in with it, and then make really beautiful objects. And that's basically where it came from. I also recognize that epoxy is popular here on YouTube. So, you know, that's another consideration as far as channel growth is concerned. But really it boils down to, I was really I was bored. And I was really looking for just something that was new and exciting. And it's been fun to figure out the epoxy too, basically on my own. There are very few channels here on YouTube that I would call instructional YouTube channels like mine is. And yeah, I mean, that's why I switched to epoxy, and I'm glad I did. I know that if you go to my home page on my channel and you scroll through my thumbnails, I mean, there's a lot of color there, and it really pops when you visit it, where if you just go to another wood turning channel, a lot of times it's just brown, light brown, darker brown. Like it's just, there's no pop in color. So anyway, that is a great question, and that is the main reason why I switched to doing epoxy. All right, so the next question is from Rhonda. Do you think you will be doing any more inlays? Yes, absolutely. Of course I will be. Like I just covered, you know, it's just I need more inlay ideas. So if you got inlay ideas, throw them in the comments, and we can see if it can be done here on the channel. Again, this is where I got my start. This is one of the things that made me unique in the wood turning world, especially when we're in the province of Ontario and I was traveling doing juried art shows. Nobody else was doing that because it was an added expense that a lot of wood turners didn't want to take or have. So, you know, they would just stick to normal straight wood, but in a way it made me unique. So that, you know, I kind of stood out in the crowd in that regard. And that's, again, the same thing coming here to YouTube. But yes, we will definitely see more inlays in the future, but, you know, I just need more inlay ideas. Along with that, you know, I see in the comments too, can you incorporate an inlay into, you know, resin work? And of course you can. One of the problems that I have is time. A lot of times I don't have enough time to do all of these steps and then have the video ready for Friday. So that's one thing. I would love to be 2 weeks ahead, but that just seems to be an impossible task where I could take my time and do things like this. But hopefully once we get over to the new workshop and things settle down, even though this year is going to be another busy year because our house is going to be going up. And I know a lot of people have been wondering if we're going to be putting up content on the house build, and I was quite surprised. I thought that my wife might say, no, let's keep that out of YouTube, but she said, no, let's do some videos on the house as it's being made. So that will be this year as well. So yeah, I mean, once we get over to the new workshop, when and if we ever get there, and I do have a little bit of news on that. I will share that here in a second. But anyway, yeah, once we get to the new workshop, hopefully we'll get back to maybe some inlay ideas. And I did actually hear back from NB Power, and this weekend, hopefully, the poles at least will be going in. So at least there's some progress there. And I was told that typically 3 to 5 days after that is when the wire will go in. So if everything works out, if everything works out, hopefully no more than 2 weeks, we'll have power at the workshop. But we'll see. Talk is cheap, as they say. Let's see some action. All right, what's the next one? So anyway, hopefully that answers that question. All right, so the next question is from Tony. How do you keep your finishes from gelling over time? Well, it's a very simple solution, and here it is right here. Stop loss bags. This is the sealer from Waterlux. As you can see, I don't put a date on it because I've literally had finishes sitting in these for a year and they still worked. So of course it's going to depend on the finish. But as long as you squeeze this, where you put all the air out of the top here and then put the cap on, these here preserve finishes like crazy, and I highly recommend getting them. And again, this was a suggestion from the comments. And thank you for those who have given me that suggestion. But these stop loss bags are a game changer as far as keeping finishes fresh so that they don't gel up and get hard to apply when you're on the lathe. Because I know there's nothing more irritating than trying to put on finishes, especially if it's your last coat and you're getting ridges in it. So I totally get it. But stop loss bags are a very good investment, especially if you're working with a expensive finish like Waterlux is. All right, so the next question is from Kay. Question: are you still going to have a display room in the new workshop? And yes, I'm gonna have a display room there. I don't know if I'll have anything to put into it, but I will have a display room for the items that don't sell. And you know, for the most part, after 2 days after a video has been posted, then things are usually gone by then. Especially, you know, if it's a popular video and it's a really attractive piece, it usually doesn't stick around too long. I still have like the jellyfish vase. I've still got that. I've still got the vase with the face in it, the tiki face, which kind of surprises me still. So, you know, the stuff that I do have, I still plan on making boards, fractal burning boards. I'm not going to show it here on the channel because of the negativity attached to it. So hopefully I'll have some of those for sale. So yeah, I will have a showroom set up there that if people want to pop by and see what I've got, then they can. But for the most part, that room is probably going to be my packing room. I debated on the showroom being essentially my intro room and my outro room because, you know, it's going to be clean compared to the rest of the workshop. But I also like having the workshop behind me in my intros and my outros. So I don't know. But yes, there definitely will be a showroom of some sort. Okay, so this was from Jamie. My tool sticks in some places while traveling along the tool rest. I've filed it, added paste wax, not sure why it still sticks at certain points. Yeah, I covered this a little bit last week or the week before, but we'll go over to the lathe here and I'll show you exactly my take on that and why this happens. So let's head over there and check that out. All right, for those who don't know, this is a tool rest right here. And the tool rest is mounted in the banjo. This is what holds the tool rest. And this one is from Robust. It's 15 inches. And this is another one from Robust that's 18 inches. And both of these have a hardened steel rod on the top. It's very durable. I've used this for a few years now and I've never had to repair it. It doesn't even feel like it needs to be repaired. So, man, no, it's actually quite nice. Which is really surprising because this has taken a fair bit of abuse over the years and it still doesn't need to be fixed. This is the 4-inch one. Let me zoom in here a little bit. This is one of the tool rests that came with my lathe. And this is a cast iron tool rest. And for those who don't know, cast iron is relatively soft. It's very durable. It'll take a lot of shock. So I think that's one of the main reasons why they may use it. But as you can see, this one's kind of chewed up. And this comes from, I typically only use this tool rest when I'm parting things off the lathe, where I'm physically cutting them off the lathe. So I don't bother fixing it. If I was using this on a regular basis, I definitely would for you know, for my turning. I do on occasion, but not very often. But if you've got a tool rust like this, you definitely need to file it down and then sand it to a really high grit, say, I don't know, 800, 1,000, maybe even higher than that. And then, you know, the tool should slide easily on it. But it's important to get these divots out of here. And this is probably one of the main things that beginners forget to do. And so they're going along and they'll get kind of a little catch because the tool gets caught in a groove on the tool rest, you know, and then it kind of ruins the cut. So this is something you need to do on a regular basis unless you buy a really good tool rest that, you know, that robust sells, that you don't have to do all that. So he mentions waxes. I personally stay away from waxes. I don't use them at all. What I like to use is this glide coat. That's what I like to use. I'll use this on table saws, band saws, the surfaces, and the great thing about this is it's not supposed to transfer any debris to the wood you're using, so it doesn't affect your finishes. So that's supposed to be the main thing for this. But if you put a wax on here, you have to make sure that you remove all of the wax debris, or else, like he suggests, it could get sticky. One of the other major things that a lot of people forget to do is to do the back side of the tools that they're working on. So if you think about it, if this has got debris transferred to it, and keep in mind I use a lot of hot melt glue, a lot of CA glue. The epoxy, if I'm using it, for the most part is going to be cured. But you know, that's going to get transferred to this rod, so it's important to clean that a lot. Well, if it's being transferred to the tool rest, it's probably being transferred to the back of the tools you're using. So I just like to take some 4-0 steel wool, get some right here. I'll do my tool rest every now and then, especially if if you rub your finger across it and you feel it dragging at all, then of course you need to address it. But I'll also do the back side of my tool. That's also important, and I think that a lot of times this is something that people really forget to do. And of course I'll spray the glide coat on the surface of this, and I'll spray it on the back side of the tools that I'm working with. It literally just takes seconds. You might even be able to see that it's already starting to haze up, and haze up on the back side of the gouge. Anyway, when it's all done, then I just take the 4-0 steel wool, clean it off, and also we'll do the back side of the tool that I'm working on, or using, I should say. And then, nice and smooth. Very important step that a lot of new wood turners forget to do. Make sure, I wish that I had the other one that originally came with my lathe. Well, this came with my lathe, but I think I've got, it might be a 15-inch as well. I can't remember now, but it's buried in my enclosure over there somewhere. But it definitely would have some dings and dents in it. So anyway, if you're looking to buy a tool rest, if you're tired of doing the filing and maintenance thing on your tool rest that came with your lathe, then check out Robust. Robust is a really good lathe manufacturer and tool manufacturer. They are not sponsored, but like I've said here countless times, if it's a good tool and a good tool company, I will certainly give them a shout out. So, and Robust is one of the best. I'm really glad that I switched to a Robust tool rest. And I don't use this one too much, but you know, this is usually when I need deep hollowing, or when I'm working on deep work inside of a form. That's where I'm going to switch to this tool rest here. And I've never seen any flex in them, that's for sure. Anyway, Robust, check them out. Hopefully that answers your question, Jamie. Don't use paste wax. All right, so next one is from Staffo. I have a question. Now, I know that you rather not want to put water in bowls and vases, but if you would make one, what that could handle it safely, what would be your approach? I would say if you insist on doing this, that it's going to take a minimum 3-4 coats of epoxy. I would not use anything else. I don't think anything else in the finish world can stand up to water that like the epoxy would. So that's probably the first thing. And the important thing is to make sure that the previous coat of epoxy is roughed up good so the next coat of epoxy will stick to it properly. That's probably going to be one of the biggest factors here. I'm not saying that you can't make it waterproof. I'm just saying that wood doesn't like water after it's been dried. It's actually really bad for wood. I get asked a lot, not a lot, there's been a few people in the past have contacted me wanting me to make them sinks. And I always try to talk them out of it. Because if you buy a sink from me, you're going to pay a lot of money for it. That's going to be the first thing. And if you want a nice shiny sink, sure, I can do the epoxy coats on it. And the first time something gets dropped into it, maybe some of that epoxy will chip off. Something like a razor. You're sitting there thinking the razor drops into the sink and it puts a big scratch in your sink. It's not as durable as porcelain is or anything like that. But I'm not saying that it can't be done. But I'm just saying that if you do have an accident in the sink, then every time you look at it, that's all you're going to see is that scratch or that line, and I think a lot of people can really understand what I'm saying there. So yeah, this is why I typically say no, you really shouldn't. There's nothing wrong with getting a vase and then putting an insert inside of it and then filling that full of water. I mean, really nobody's going to know the difference. Some people have said in the past, a lot of comments that, well, some of these pieces I made, you could maybe turn them into aquariums. Yeah, but over time, I don't know if the epoxy is going to leach anything out into the water that may possibly kill those fish. There's just I don't really know. But I just know that water and dried wood is not a good mix, and that's why I typically stay away from it. But anyway, I see that a lot. So thanks for asking that question. It was a good one. All right, what's next? This one's from Law. What model respirator are you using? Yeah, second. All right, so I used to use the Air Shield Pro Trend Air Shield Pro. I think it's what it's called. And I have now switched to the Power Cap from JSP. What I like about this respirator is it's light compared to the other respirator that I had. I had another one that was even heavier than that one, and so the weight on this is great. The only real negative that I don't like about this is where the filters are located. So you're working and the filters are right in front of your work, so there's a lot of dust going into these. So I find that I have to take this off, say in a full day. I'll take this off twice and blow the filters off, just the surface, blow across the top. Sometimes I'll take them out and reverse blow them, and I know you're not supposed to do that. I'm sure there'd be some comments there, but that's what I do. Overall, I think that it's been a good buy. This came from Peak Safety. That's P-E-K-E Safety in the US. After I paid duty on it, I think it was around $1,200 Canadian, something like that. It's certainly going to be a lot more now with how weak our dollar is. But I've got tear off, replaceable things that I probably don't replace enough. Again, you can see, I don't know if the camera's going to pick that up or not, but there's CA droplets where I've been sprayed with it. So this is another reason why I like to wear a full face shield when I'm on the lathe, because if you don't get that, then you end up getting it on your face or wherever. But yeah, this one's ready to be changed, but I don't know. It's buried back there somewhere. Hopefully I can find it. Anyway, the battery mounts on the back. The battery works great. It will give you a full 8 hours of turning. I will definitely say that. I did have an issue with The battery, this thing is probably a year and a half old now, maybe a little older than that. I did have a problem with the battery. Here, there's a little switch, but it's covered. And this one had a crack in it, and eventually this stopped working properly. So when I got this replacement, I actually put a piece of tape over it to help it, so that hopefully it's not going to do that in the future. But yeah, you push and hold it, and then eventually the respirator comes on. And you know, it's also quieter than the last one I was using as well. So overall, you know, I'm happy with this. One thing that I did have to do when I bought this, when I first got it, on the inside, it's a one size fits all. They've got this in the back to tighten it up, but you know, I don't like having my head in a vise, to be quite honest with you. So I don't have a real large head. I used to take a 7 1/8 beret when I was in the Army. And what I did was, on Amazon, I went and got a bunch of bicycle helmet material, and I put that in there. And ever since doing that, it sits more comfortably on my head. And what I found was, when I wore it initially out of the box, my glasses were kind of hitting on the top. I wear glasses when I'm turning because, well, as I get older, I'm starting to lose that. I just need reading glasses. My vision's fine for distance, but I need, when I'm doing close-up work, I have to wear glasses. So I found that it was kind of interfering with those, and then I called Peak Safety, and they said, yeah, just get some of that bicycle helmet material, and that'll sort that out, and it did. Overall, if I had to give this a score out of 10, 10 being the most, I'll give it an 8.5. Somewhere around there. And I would put the trend at maybe a 6, maybe. But anyway, I think it's been a good buy. And again, not sponsored. Just enjoy it. But I really wish that this was maybe located at the back of the unit. Some tubes going to the back. But anyway, what do I know? I'm not a respirator designer. All right, so the next question is from Big John. How did your relationship start with designer epoxy? That's a good question. So, like I said earlier, I was looking to get into epoxy. I did a Google search on epoxies, and of course I'm in Canada, and found out that through research that designer epoxy had the best price, and they were only 4 hours from me. So that was one thing. They're just on the outside of Montreal. So, you know, I bought the first kit because I didn't have anything to do with, have any idea about epoxy really, other than what I'd seen on YouTube, and found it was incredibly easy to use. I mean, that's all there is to it. It really was. And I was expecting it to be a lot more difficult than it was. And it was getting better results than what I was seeing on YouTube from other manufacturers. So I hit them up for sponsorship, and you know, that's it. We started off, it was a bit rocky when we first started off. He wasn't selling a lot of kits involving my code, but now I think that it's more than paid off for him, and we have a really good kind of business relationship. There's no money exchange between us. He sends me products when I want them, and it's a great relationship between me and designer epoxy, and I'm really glad that I have him as a sponsor. But that's a great question, you know, and that kind of goes with a lot of the sponsors that you see here on the channel. I was using sandpaper.ca long before coming to YouTube, and that business has changed hands since I've been using them. Starbond is a relatively new one. They actually approached me for sponsorship, so you know, that's been for the most part a positive relationship as well. There's some other things in behind that kind of aren't working for me, but and of course Hunter Tools. I mean, kind of covered them a bit too. Great tools. I mean, I'm concerned about my name. I don't want anybody bashing me, so I'm not going to suggest to use products unless I wholeheartedly believe in them. I'm just not that guy. But anyway, that's a great question, John. Thanks for that. Let's see what's next. Okay, this is from Gary. What is your typical charge for your work? As I'm getting better at this, but I still have an issue with charging for my work. Yeah, this is going to be a tough one. So it really depends on your market. That's probably a big one. My labor rate is $80 an hour plus expenses. And so, you know, if I put in an 8-hour day, I expect to get minimum, you know, $640. So is that right? Yeah, 64. $640. So then, of course, you know, you've got your expenses on top of that, your lights, your shop equipment, you know, moving over into the new workshop. If you look at new equipment costs for me, I'm anticipating between $20,000 and $30,000. So, you know, if you're not charging for that and your heat and the cost of your structure, you know, it's really hard to make a living at this occupation. I have, you know, now a fairly large online presence, so that certainly helps me move my products. But, you know, you've got to pay yourself. And if you're not paying yourself, then it's pretty hard to stay in business. It really is. And, you know, when I retired from the military and went into this full time, yeah, there was, you know, the first 3 years I never showed a profit at all. But, you know, it took me a while to sort out my show schedule and get that, you know, locked in as far as what shows are producing, what shows aren't. Because back in those days, I didn't have any online presence at all. I think I had my Instagram account, but I didn't really have anything else because I really liked going to shows and meeting people face to face. There is no better way to build your business than to meet somebody at a show and watch their reactions when they come into your booth. They're picking things up, they're looking things over, and then they're setting them down. And, you know, I would ask them, so I seen you looking at that bowl. I was just kind of curious why you set that down you're not interested in. She goes, you know, well, maybe it's the color. It's too big, it's too small, that's too expensive. You can't get that from an online business. The only way that you can get that is face-to-face interaction. So it's important that you go to shows, and I'm not talking just your mom and pop. Try and stay away from the more trashy shows. If somebody isn't judging your work to get into that show, then that's probably a show that you don't want to do. That's the way that I look at it. So after you have that foundation, then you'll get a feel for what is moving in your market. And yeah, you may need to bring down your prices in order to meet that. And then, you know, as your business builds, and, you know, there's a lot of people that are watching this video that are repeat customers. You know, one guy in particular in California, I'm not going to say his name, but he has a lot of my work. And so you'll get repeat business. But it's really going to depend on your skill level. What are you bringing to market? Is it eye-catching, or is it a boat anchor? You know, there's a lot of things that really go into pricing your work. You could go around to shows and see what the general price is on other things that are there at the show, and then you know, price your work accordingly. Is my work as good as that, or is it not as good as that? If it's not as good as that, then I probably can't charge that you know, that the good work is commanding. But, you know, there's a market for all kind of levels of wood turning. But it's just kind of one of those things you're really going to need to figure out yourself, because I can't do it because I don't really know your market. So anyway, I know that's kind of a vague answer, but really that's about the only one I can give you. Sorry. What speed do you have the lathe running when you're applying the water lux? Yeah, I don't have a digital readout on my lathe, but I'd say it's anywhere between 60 to 80 RPM when I'm applying it, somewhere around there. Probably the biggest thing for applying, well, really any finish, is the amount of volume that you have on your rag. I don't know if you've picked it up on the videos, and I guess maybe I haven't really talked about it all that much, but, you know, I'll put the water lux on, and, you know, and then it's kind of like using polyurethane on a table. Get it all on and then take long sweeping strokes to clean it off. Well, that's the same thing. I apply it onto whatever I'm working, and then I'll slowly work all the way back out, making sure to level all of that. And I find that that's probably the best way for me to get the finishes you see here on the channel. But 60 to 80 RPM is typically where it's at, ish. This is from Tabitha. Is there an exotic wood / material that would only be imported that you're interested in trying but have never had a chance to? Say something from the Amazon or Europe. What would make an interesting project to turn, in your opinion? Yeah, there's, I've worked with, I'll say, quite a few exotics. The one thing, the problem here in Canada is when exotics come in, they're usually in dimensional lumber. They're like in turning squares, you know, boards. There's no turning half logs or anything like that. So that's something that, you know, I'd love to get my hands on some blackwood that's get that white outer ring all the way around it, and, you know, invert them natural edge to natural edge and do a casting with that, or cocobolo, or any of these really nice, beautiful exotic woods. But you just really can't get them here. I've never seen them, and they're even hard to get online because in most cases, when woods are being transported across borders, one of the requirements is that the bark has to be removed, because typically insects will be in the bark on a lot of woods. So they'll strip all of that off, and that's not a real big deal because I'm going to strip it off anyway. But when they strip it off, they usually strip it off mechanically, and it leaves a pretty nasty looking surface from what I've seen. So, but yeah, there's a lot of things I've got. In the future, I've got some, I want to do some alabaster turning. So that's one thing that we haven't done here. And I'm talking a block of alabaster or a block of soapstone, and we'll make something with that. But as far as exotics are concerned, yeah, that's kind of really what I'd like to have is, you know, just some natural edge burls from the Amazon would be absolutely incredible. And anything that where you can get that natural edge and you can put them together would make a really cool piece. So that's a great question. Thanks for that, Tabitha. Okay, so I don't know who, I forgot to write their name down. What epoxy colors do you like to use, for what reason? So there's more questions here, but I'll tackle this one first. Well, I think it's pretty clear. I love the deep purples on the channel here and the deep blues. Those are my favorite colors. Ones that I really don't like, baby pink. that's one of the colors that I really don't like. You have to put a ton of the pigment in it to really get the color that you're looking for, but you know, it's not really my color. I'm more a blues and deep purple type guy. That's what I like the best. What else we got here? What types of woods do you find most difficult to turn? That's a good question there. So the soft hardwoods they're easy to turn, but they're very unforgiving when it comes to tear out. If you're going to get tear out in pieces, and what I mean by tear out, for those who are not aware, it usually typically only happens on the end grain, and it essentially, like it says, it tears the fibers out of the wood. So then you have to go deeper in order to get rid of that, or you have to do a lot of sanding to get rid of it. So the softer hardwoods will demand really sharp tools to get good clean cuts. And on the other end of the spectrum, they're harder woods. So, you know, the sugar pines, sugar maples, hard maples, walnut is another one that I find is a little harder to work with too, because it's a harder wood. Cherry I find is a beautiful wood to turn, but you have to have your tool work has to be really good with those harder woods, or else you're doing a ton of sanding. And, you know, I don't like sanding, and I think there's very few people in the world that really love sanding. But you're in there, I know you are, because I've seen you in the comments. But anyway, that's what I find as far as domestic hardwoods are concerned here in Canada. Hard maple, walnut, and of course those are the harder ones to do, but they're harder to do on different scales. Softer woods because they're difficult to work with, harder woods because your tool work has to be perfect to prevent a lot of sanding. So hopefully that makes sense. Does anyone else in your family do wood turning or some other form of art? My wife likes to paint. She hasn't painted in many years. I think part of the reason for that is, you know, we're a family of 5, so, you know, the kids took up a lot of her time, a lot of her spare time. She's very, very crafty. I don't think there's any craft that she can't do, and she's great with color. So if I'm struggling with colors, a lot of times I'll send her a text, because usually we're not co-located when we're working, and say, hey, what do you think about? I'm going to think about throwing these colors together. What do you think? And I'll use her opinion, or a lot of times I'll disregard it. I just know I want to use these colors because I want to see how they work out. But a lot of times, you know, she'll say, well, you really shouldn't, because they're not really a good match. But, you know, most times it works out, a lot of times it doesn't. But she's great with color, so I do rely on her for that. But she does landscapes. That's what she was doing before she kind of give up on it. You know, as a painter, you need a space that inspires you. And if you're in the basement of a house, that's not very inspiring. So I think that's part of the reason. And the fact that, you know, we were just very busy. We had 2 kids in hockey, and kids played soccer, and it's, you know, we were just go, go, go. And, you know, these things kind of get put to the side. I'm able to do this because it was my occupation. So, well, it was my occupation on the side when I was in the forces, and then when I retired, I went into it full time. So, you know, I was getting my fix, but I know that she would like to do more crafty stuff in the future, but we'll see. Hopefully with the new house, she'll be able to set up a painting studio and get back to painting. As far as my kids are concerned, I wouldn't so much call them crafty. Our daughter, yeah, I could probably say she's crafty. She's actually picked up needlepoint now, which is kind of surprising, but hey, that's cool. Our 2 boys, I think that if they had a place to work out of, then they probably would get into woodworking. They'd be making things out of wood. So I know that, you know, welding is kind of in their wheelhouse too. And my oldest, I think he really would like to try some forging. So yeah, I mean, we're a family that works with our hands. That's kind of who we are. And but yeah, I think they're just kind of waiting for that space to come along where they can create in it, and that includes my wife too. So anyway, that was a great question. All right, so this one's from Big Boy. What has been the most memorable project that you have done for a commission, and the story behind it? Well, I'm going to have to say that probably the most memorable commission that I did, well, there's probably 2 of them. One's probably, you're going to be really surprised when you hear this commission. And one, you know, it's kind of a tragic story, excuse me. It's kind of a tragic story in a way. So I did, this couple was getting married, and they're into curling really large. And they wanted essentially a guest signing book for their wedding that was shaped like a curling stone, that people could write on it, and that way they would use it as a piece of decor in their house. And then, of course, when anybody would come by, they'd say, well, what's that? And they say, well, it's actually people signed on it. So picture a curling stone with a handle, and here's the bottom. And what I did was, the top piece was walnut, the bottom piece was walnut, and in between it were 3/4 inch boards. I think there was about 4 of them, or 5 of them, and I pinned it up on this end by the handle. So they were of course round, you could slide them out, sign on them, and then slide them back in. So it looked like a curling stone. So that was one of the more stranger commissions, but cooler commissions that I'd done. And he had a handle, so anyway, it actually was pretty nice when it was done. So that's one of the most memorable ones I've done. One of the more meaningful ones that I've done is my buddy Troy up in Ontario. His mom passed away, kind of tragic circumstances how she died. And I made 3 urns for him and his family. So, you know, a lot of the memorable turnings are the urn ones, and I know that there's some people waiting for urns now from me. The problem is, I just can't make urns every week here, and you know, like I've said in the past, like I don't have production time. I don't. YouTube is all encompassing, and you know, I just don't have time to make a lot of things on the side, or much of anything on the side, really. So you know, those commissions, being selected as the person. When somebody comes to you and says, I would like for you to make an urn for a loved one, I mean, that's quite an honor and quite humbling that somebody would want me to do that for them. So, you know, in that instance, I knew Troy and the circumstances behind it, which I'm not going to get into. Very tragic the way that she ended up passing. Anyway, that's kind of the one of the more memorable turns as well. Anyway, good question. So I don't know, am I boring you yet? On the last page, it was like, yeah, that's in this. This is from Jillian. Can you make an exact replica of any of your pieces, given that you have the original makings of them on YouTube? Can I make the same style? Yes. Is it going to look the same? Absolutely not. The epoxy will do epoxy things. And there's no way that you can ever replicate the look of that. Yeah, you can mix it up the same, but the results will no doubt be different. And the great thing about this occupation is that, you know, there's never any two things alike. And the bad thing about this occupation is that there's never any two things alike. So if you're trying to replicate things, it's a very tough thing to do in wood turning, especially when you're combining epoxy as well. I've made a number of bowl sets, plate sets in the past, all out of ash or out of different woods that all kind of look the same. And, you know, those definitely all had the same sort of vibe and feel to them, but, you know, they're not exactly the same because no two will ever be the same. But profiles, yeah, not a problem, but will the end product look the same? In all likelihood, probably not, but close. Okay, this is from Steph. What kind of advice would you give someone that wants to become a full-time YouTuber? The good, the bad, and the ugly. Whereas I could probably do a video on this one all by itself. Okay, so the good. I think that it has been a very positive change for me to come to YouTube. It has made me a better turner. It certainly has, I would say, put me more into the artistic side of wood turning. And it's really allowed me to explore my creativity, where when I was working, say, to do these juried art shows, that, you know, it was about production. You need numbers to go to these shows. You know, if you're not showing up with if you're not showing up to these shows with $10,000 worth of inventory or more, then you're wasting your time. Because when you look at the cost of doing the shows involved and the cost of production, you know, it's you've got to sell large. So, you know, by switching to YouTube, that's allowed me to become more creative. And I think that, you know, that for me has been a really positive thing. To be honest with you, I always treated YouTube, I want to sit down here. There, pull out a stool so I can sit down. So, to be honest with you, when I first, before even thinking about being a YouTuber, the only time that I would use YouTube is when I want to fix something. Say the ice maker quit in the fridge. How do you change an ice maker? How do you pull the transmission out of a 1974 tractor? You know, this kind of thing. I purely just looked at YouTube as a resource and not so much a sitting there relaxing type content. So I never really even dreamt that coming to YouTube would be as good as it has been financially. And, you know, for the most part, I think that I've left a positive impact on my viewers. I try to keep it light and funny. You know, I keep it clean. There's no need to not keep it clean unless you're being bonked in the head. and I'll maybe insert a video there. But for the most part, it's been a very, very positive experience. The one thing that I never even thought would be a thing would be how much of a community YouTube is here. There's people that are here day in, day out on my channel, week after week, that always comment and, leave positive comments. And it's just been very rewarding to be here. So thank you all for that. The bad. The one thing that I was not ready for was the after hours that YouTube will take from you. And you have no idea how many emails I get in the run of a week. And I do my best to answer all these emails, and there's probably people watching there saying, well, you never answered my email. Yeah, because, when you're getting, say, 20 emails a day from people looking for help, there's just not enough hours in a day. And so besides what you see going on here in the workshop, it's all the hours answering comments, which we want, so keep them coming, but it can be all consuming. Glad that my wife is now helping me with comments, because there's no way I'd be able, at this point, it'd be very, very, very tough for me to answer the comments on my own. Like, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but that's what my life would be when I'm not here in the workshop working. And of course, answering emails in detail. And, the emails that come in, they're like, yeah, I love what you're doing. Don't stop what you're doing. Thank you so much. And those are great emails, and I really do appreciate those emails for sure. But, I'll get a lot of emails where, well, I didn't really understand what you said in the video. Can you explain to me in detail how you did that? And so, it takes a long time to answer these emails. And, so that takes away from production. That's another thing. When I first came here, I was, of course, doing video all day. And then in the evenings, I was doing all the editing, and I was answering emails and answering comments, and, I was burning out. It's just something that I wasn't ready for. And if you had a personal assistant that could answer all these emails, it would be great. But, that's certainly not in the budget. I don't make that kind of money. Don't think that I do. I'm still driving a 2017 Ram, okay? There's no Ferraris in my inventory. So that's kind of the bad part about YouTube. And, you can look at it good or bad. But, you have to treat, if you're going to be a YouTuber and you want to make it a success, you got to treat this like your life depends on it. You have to treat it like a business. And I can't help but think that, for a lot of YouTubers that get into this, they don't. And, when I came to this, like, I get bills to pay just like everybody else. So, I've treated this channel like my life depends on it. So, we're at some point here, we might want to retire down the road. So we need to try and, make that possible. And of course, that's coming from ads revenue. So thank you for those who watch my content in the ads. And, I'll also get questions like, how can we help you essentially make more revenue on YouTube? And probably the easiest way is to not skip the ads when you're shown. I'll get a little boost in revenue. So if you got thousands of people doing that, and of course that's going to add to your bottom line, but I get it. I typically use the skip button too, so I get it. But that is probably the easiest way to basically boost my revenue here on YouTube, or whoever your favorite YouTuber is. Just don't skip the ads if they're reasonable length. But anyway, that's kind of the bad side of YouTube. The ugly. Yeah, the ugly. You have to have a thick skin, because people will say some pretty mean things. Now, I kind of laugh at those comments, given my past occupation. Trust me, I've seen it all, heard it all, probably said it all. So, you can hit me with the comments and I don't really care. The only problem that I have is if there's language involved with it, or if they're really rude comments, then, you know, in all likelihood, you're going to get banned. So, you know, if you don't have a thick skin, I would not suggest starting a YouTube channel. And you would think, well, this is a wood turning channel. How bad can it be? And for the most part, 99.9% of the comments that come in, they're actually very positive comments. And, you know, constructive criticism comments, I'll take those all day long. Like, you know what, the great thing about us as human beings is that we're all different. We all like different things. We all have different opinions. And we all maybe like to see things done a different way. But, you know, there's no need for it to come across rudely. But, you know, it does on occasion. And, you know, for the most part, I try to let these things go, and for the most part, they don't bother me. You know, there's the odd one that gets in there that kind of gets under my skin. But for the most part, it's positive. But you better have a thick skin, and you better know what you're talking about. Because if you don't know what you're talking about, people are going to call you out on it. That's the other thing. You need to be knowledgeable in your subject. And, you know, a way to approach that would be, if you're a new wood turner, you want to say, look, I want to start my own YouTube channel. The way that I would approach it is, the very first shot would be, I'm a new wood turner. I've started my channel. Please follow me along my journey. You can help me along the way, and we can grow together and kind of build it through the years until, you know, you become to, you know, like my level or somebody else's level that's, you know, equivalent to mine or whatever. But yeah, the other big one is get on camera. Yeah, I don't like watching content that I don't know who is making what. If all I see is hands, you know, you know, there's some channels that I watch, wood turning channels that I watch, where they keep their identity secret. But, you know, I find that you need a connection between the person you're watching and yourself. And the only way to really get that is to be on the screen. That's the way that I looked at it. That's the way that I approached it from day one. I think that a lot of times those channels may be a little more successful than other channels. With that said, a lot of these ASMR channels are very successful channels, and not taking anything from them. They make great content. But, you know, I've always looked at it as, if I want this channel to be successful, then I think that I want to get on camera so that people know who they're talking about. That's one thing, and it also removes any doubt that if you buy something from me, it was made from me. So that's another big one. But anyway, there's probably more to it than that. Well, I'm sure there is a lot more to it, but that's a great question. But for the most part, it's absolutely awesome being here, and I just can't imagine doing anything moving forward, to be perfectly honest with you. Great question. Jennifer, is there anything that surprises you about being on YouTube, and what brought you to the platform? That's kind of almost the same question. The reason why I'm here is because of the world event, the vid. The vid is why I'm here. All the shows got shut down because of it, and my middle child said to me, hey, why don't you start your YouTube channel? And I'm like, I don't know a thing about editing. I don't know a thing about shooting video. I don't know a thing about any of this stuff. And to be perfectly honest with you, I wasn't really all that comfortable being on camera. But that's probably the main reason why I'm here. And I'm glad I made that decision. And you know, he kind of pushed me in that direction. I probably would have been fine to just sit home and basically not have any expenses. We would have got by. My wife still works full time. And maybe just stick to an online business during those times. But, you know, the one thing about these online businesses when it comes to wood turning is, you know, it's a lot of photography. Every time you sell a piece, you know, you got to take it down. It's a lot of computer work too. The editing was a struggle when I first started. I'm not going to lie. I use Move. That's the editing software that I use. And I was using a computer that really wasn't a good quality computer, and the computer would freeze. And there were days where I literally debated taking the computer and snapping it over my knee. Like, I'm not joking. I was that close. So I had zero editing skills. Didn't have a clue about any of it. So, you know, I think that I've come a long way since then. I fortunate enough that the last few years that I was in the military, I basically flew a desk, if you will. A lot of computer work. So I do have computer skills. Not as good as my wife, but I do have computer skills. She will help me out in that regard too. But she doesn't know anything about editing or anything like that. But, you know, I have a website. I don't keep it up to date because I just find that it's a real pain to do so. And the fact that, you know, I don't really have much for sale is another reason why I just don't even bother keeping my website up to date. Because a lot of people go to my website looking for stuff and then, well, there's nothing there. Well, it's because I don't really have anything extra to sell. So that's why my website is such as it is. I've actually even debated on just shutting it down because I really don't need it, to be honest with you. And all I seem to do is get spam from it too. That's the other thing. But anyway, yeah, that's it. Let me read that again and make sure that I got everything there. So yeah, I mean, the work behind the scenes is one of the things that really kind of surprised me, and I didn't think that it was going to be as big as it is. So if you do have a successful channel, and you know, what's a successful channel? Yeah, YouTube gave me a plaque at 100,000 subscribers. Does that mean it's successful? I'm going to assume that maybe that is. Me, I deem truly successful channels as having 1 million subscribers, which I don't think that I will ever have. But, you know, I'm very happy with my channel growth, and thank you to those who have subscribed to my channel. I really do appreciate it, and thank you for your support. You guys are absolutely awesome. Do you think it's, this is from Drayland. Do you think it's necessary or recommend to add finish like Waterlux to small resin projects like pendants? If you can polish that epoxy, I would say that's what I would do first. Again, a lot of people have reactions to certain things, so skin contact with certain things, I don't know if it's good. That's something that is probably a question that's better asked for Waterlux. Essentially, I think when Waterlux is fully cured, it's inert. So yeah, you can put that on your pendants as well. But if it's something that's all epoxy, that can be polished, and you can probably skip the finish stage if that's really what the question is about. But talking to whatever manufacturer that makes the finish that you want to use is probably best in that regard. So I'll just leave it at that. Let the manufacturer answer that question for you, because, you know, I truly don't know. Still a good question though. This is from William. What type of wood do you think is the best to learn on as a beginner? That is probably a great question that probably doesn't get asked enough. Free wood. That's the best wood to learn on. Free wood. Stay away from softwoods. Softwoods are really difficult because they're soft, and you know, I talked about this earlier, they're harder to cut clean. So they can be frustrating for a new wood turner to work on because you won't be getting the results that you're maybe expecting. Soft maple, white birch, poplar. Those are probably the three domestic hardwoods that are on the softer side, that are easy to tool, will still hold a detail relatively well, and sand easy. So I would recommend those woods to start on. But like I said, if it's free and it doesn't cost you anything, other than burls, don't start with burls. That's probably the last thing you want to do. And to go along with that, the ones to avoid are the harder woods. The sugar maples, hard maple, walnuts, all the valuable woods, cherry. Don't use those woods until you're competent with what you're doing, because those woods can be expensive to buy and hard to find. And to be honest with you, it's kind of a shame, unless you're in an area where walnut's really prevalent, to throw a piece of walnut on and whittle it down to work on your skills. Just stick to found wood. And if you live in an urban setting, Be careful about yard trees. A lot of yard trees will have metal in them. So I have a cheap metal detector that I bought off of Amazon. So when I would get logs, I would always check those logs and look for metal because, you know, if you happen to hit something, a lot of times you can cut it off because the high-speed steel that's in a gouge will cut off most nails. But you'll definitely hear it, and it could actually, if you're using carbide, something that's really hard, it might actually shatter that because it's happened to me in the past as well. So buy yourself a cheap metal detector and look for metal in your pieces before you use them as well. But those are the woods that I would start with if I was starting my wood turning career, and I wish that I would have had that advice when I first started, because I probably ruined a lot of really nice woods until I was competent and I knew what I was doing. All right, next question. All right, so this is going to be the last question. I have no idea how long this video is going to be. This thing could be an hour long, could be a half hour, could be 10 minutes. I don't know. I know it's not going to be 10 minutes. So the last one's going to go to Susie. What is a piece that's still on your bucket list? One of the problems that I have with the General behind me here is the size of it. It is an industrial lathe. It does weigh, you know, probably close to 1,000 pounds as it sits with all the stuff that I have mounted on it. But it's no large one-way 24-36 with 3 horsepower, 3 to 5 horsepower motor. So, you know, what I want to do is get into making really large hollow forms, and I think I've talked about this a bit in the last few videos, and you know, making really large boring bars, you know, like 1 inch thick boring bars where, you know, you can deep hollow something 24 inches and, you know, turn stuff that's 24 inches in diameter or bigger, and, you know, make more artistic pieces like that out of, you know, could be just straight wood. Here in New Brunswick, up north, there's a lot of bird's eye maple. I've got a contact up there. Haven't talked to him in a little while. Hopefully he's still doing that. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to get some really large logs from him and turn out some really cool looking bird's eye maple pieces without any epoxy. Possibly do some green turning and then let it warp and distort and, you know, this kind of business. I'm not done with epoxy at all. I think that, you know, we have a long ways to go building really large epoxy pieces that are made in sections and then putting them all together. Right now, I'm kind of handcuffed by the lathe that I have. The General's been reliable. That was bought in 2011, I think I bought it. And I mean, it rarely shuts off. And the only thing that has really let me down on that lathe was the quill got tore out of the tailstock. That's the only major thing that's really gone wrong with that lathe, and it has seen a ton of use, but it does have its limitations. So a lathe upgrade is definitely in order with a very large outboard turning attachment where we can turn. If I want to turn a 6-foot table, we'll do it. That's kind of where I want to go as far as bucket list pieces are concerned. So that's a great question. There'll be a lot more down the road. Along with that, I'm going to get more heavily into flat work, river tables, making our own bases for those, maybe even doing some welded up bases. That could be coming. I need to work on my welding skills better and buy a little better welder than what I've got. And so anyway, that's kind of the future for the channel when and if we can ever get over into the new workshop. If we get some power. So yeah, that's where my bucket list is right now. I've scratched the surface as far as what I want to do as a wood turner is concerned, and hopefully you guys will see it in the future. All right, that's going to do it for the video. Hopefully you guys found it informative. Hopefully you didn't find it too boring. One of the questions that I'm surprised that I didn't get asked was, what are my intentions here on YouTube? How long do you think I'm going to be here on YouTube? What are my plans moving forward? Well, right now, I'm 56 years old. My wife is still working full time. She's got at least I'd say another 6 years to go before she can probably retire. So as long as she's working full-time, then I fully expect to be here full-time as well. So, you know, you can anticipate my channel going full-time for at least another 6 years. But, you know, I don't do well sitting around. I don't do well sitting around. So I like to get out and make things and be creative. So, you know, even after the 6-year mark, I will still probably be here, but maybe in a reduced capacity, maybe 2 videos a month, 1 video a month, whatever it's going to be. You know, that's all health. Health is involved there as well. I've got 2 bad knees that need to be replaced. So at some point, those are going to have to be done. And as long as I can stay healthy, I will be here. I love doing this. I really do love doing this. Even with the bad and the ugly, I definitely do love being here on YouTube. So those are my intentions. I would say that I'm going to be here full-time for the next 6 years, and then after that we'll make a call, because, you know, the wife and I probably want to do some traveling. So there's that part of it too. But yeah, I mean, it's very rewarding, and thank you so much for your support over the years. I really do appreciate it, and I'm not going anywhere. You're gonna have to put up with me for at least another 6 years. All right, as far as next week is concerned, we'll be back on the lathe. I don't know exactly what it's going to be yet, but please come on back for that next week. And again, please leave a comment down below, and you can throw designer epoxy down there too for those who are living in continental USA and Canada for the draw at 140,000 subs when we get there. And last thing I'd just like to say is thank you so much for your support and allowing me to be here on YouTube. It has been very rewarding, and hopefully we'll only get bigger and better moving forward. Have yourselves a great weekend. See you next week.